been too long, in my opinion. Um, got done with some medical school exams. It was a weird block of 3 weeks of just intense drugs and bugs and an exam in every week. So just got done with that. Feels good to be free of that. And on to some things that are happening in the world. And I definitely want to address some messages I've been getting from people. Thank you for all the heartfelt, encouragement and all the questions that people have been asking about the current times. Things have kind of ramped up in the last 3 weeks here. And really, I saw something that just pushed me over the edge. And I hope it not pushed me over any edge, but I mean, it made me want to make a video for sure. Check this out. I'll share the screen here on both accounts. Hope I can do that on here. Don't know how to do it on there. All right. On here I can do it though. I'll share it on YouTube and Facebook here. Anyone who's here in the chat, hi Kara. Let me know if you can. Hello to Northern Nevada. Let's see if you can see what I'm seeing here, which is a disturbing sight. So thumbs up if you can see this. But this is a group of children being led in how to walk like COVID zombies. And I wish I was exaggerating that. But no, this is sincerely is what is happening right now. You've got children being covered and only see me here, huh? Let's see now. Does that work there? Hi, life is beautiful. It looks like you can see the screen I'm seeing now. And so we're teaching children to socially distance, to wear masks and cover up. And this is just not following. And I'm going to say some things that aren't popular, but I've been also reading with my son something that, something that wasn't too popular and still isn't too popular these days, but Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. Fantastic story of overcoming tremendous obstacles and still loving people the entire way through. So I say this completely out of love, completely out of desire to see children and you and all of us living healthy, happy, free, vibrant lives. And this stuff has to end. It really does, because it's not based in science. It's not based in common sense. And I'll explain that very shortly here. I'll show a bunch of different graphs that are very easy to see, very easy to understand. I'm not trying to confuse anything here. I want to make it very clear why some people are questioning the narrative that is being fed to us in the mainstream and why this bothers a lot of people. You'll see the next, hopefully I can share the next photo here. You'll see some children wearing plastic bottles over their head. It's a rather disturbing sight. And it's a rather disturbing condition that we're training children to get used to. When, again, there are much better answers to what is going on, and there's much more sense that can be found on a different pathway than covering ourselves up with plastic bottles and walking like zombies. So that's where this is coming from. Just to look back quickly, if you look back in the swine flu, which was just 2009, 2010, children were dying. You have age 0 to 17, you have 1,300 deaths from children. At the current rate of COVID right now, you have 332 deaths. That does not seem like a lot, does it? Comparatively. It's a lot in general. Anytime we're seeing children die or people die, it's more than we want to see. But what are we doing? We weren't changing anything in our procedures last time when the swine flu, and now we've got children completely different, taking a different route here. And I'm going to continue sharing this and ask you to just ask a couple questions, because a lot of people say they have an open mind, but truly, do you have an open mind? To me, that means I'm willing to throw away things that were incorrect in the past, change my perspective upon the introduction of new information. And you have to ask yourself, is the vaccine really working the way people are saying it is? I know it's being advertised to us in a certain fashion, but look at these numbers. Before the vaccine, back in 2020, you had how many cases of COVID? And now you're seeing more hospital admissions for COVID, even though the vaccine is out. Yes, only 50% of the population has it, but that's 50% more than had it last year. So is it getting the result that it's supposed to be getting? You hear that it's supposed to, but then people still have to mask up. You're supposed to be safe, and those who aren't going to take it, they're supposed to run the risk. That's how it's always gone. The infection rate for the swine flu, well, you can see how many infections there were. Are you looking for the case fatality rate? Keto, you're asking that. You can see that there were far more infections of COVID for children between 0 and 17, and yet the deaths were only 332. You had 27 million infections. The infection fatality rate was 0.0066 when you had in the case of swine flu, and now you're seeing a infection fatality rate of 0.0012. So it's on orders less, and yet we're taking far more drastic and different behaviors for children. And I'll explain this, Susanna. Susanna's asking a great question. The vaccine will only work if I get mine. That's not the way vaccines are supposed to work. The vaccine is supposed to protect those who get the vaccine, and those who aren't getting the vaccine aren't getting the vaccine. They choose to run the risk, as we already have let that happen with flu and pertussis and a whole host of different vaccinations. And later in this display of media that I'm giving you here, you will see why is it that doctors are some of the hardest group of people to convince to get vaccines? Why is it healthcare workers are some of the hardest to get vaccines? Why do pediatricians not give their children the same vaccines they're recommending to other people? I'll explain that and show very good resources for you to check more information on that about, but I'll share some primary resources on that as well. And we're also looking at infections and deaths, but it's interesting to note that the cases aren't always true infections and hospital cases. Cases is just simply a positive test. And if you watch the most recent YouTube video I posted up of me in medical school, you'll see it says it right on the informed consent form when you're signing to get the test that you can get a positive test for a whole host of different infections. You can get a positive test for something completely different than coronavirus. And coronavirus itself, as I was just taught in medical school, reinforced this again. You know what the second most common cause of the common cold is? By their mainstream medical world knowledge? Coronavirus. And so you can test positive and not really have a full case. A case used to mean you have a test or some type of positive test and clinical symptoms, not asymptomatic. That's not a case. That was just a positive test. So we've really confused these numbers here, and we can keep running up cases anytime we increase testing. Now I want to move past this and just ask you a couple questions of evaluating what path we're going on and do we really want to do this. So you can see this post from the Toronto Star, a newspaper up in Canada. And trying to share here on YouTube as well and on Instagram. And you'll see that the headline is, if unvaccinated people catch COVID from someone who's vaccinated, boo-hoo, too bad. Unvaccinated patients do not deserve ICU beds. I don't care for this kind of rhetoric at all. I don't care who my worst enemy would be. I want them to be well enough. We can have differences, but I want people to be taken care of, and I don't see the reason for discrimination like this or encouraging this type of discrimination and division amongst people. And yet, this is coming from vaccinated people, obviously. Doesn't seem too compassionate, and doesn't seem to jive too much with what we're supposed to be having as a healthcare system that's based upon equality for all and wanting to do well by other peoples. If we see also a report out of Chicago, a mother in a divorce issue with her husband was stripped of her rights to see her child because she didn't get the vaccine. The judge asked her, "Did you get the vaccine, ma'am?" She said no, and he promptly rescinded her rights to see her son. This is not the type of behavior we want to see. Does that happen with flu vaccine? Does that happen with, pertussis vaccine, tetanus vaccine? No. But for some reason, that was permitted by the judge at the time. Thankfully, it was overturned. But this is kind of the trajectory we're heading on, which is a massive division amongst people who want to get a treatment and other people who don't want to get a treatment. I'm not here to tell you particularly what to do, but I hope that, and that's never going to be my goal as a health care provider, as a doctor as well. I just see my role as providing all the information that's available to me, and then you'll make the intelligent decision for yourself, for your family. And that's that's a free society, and that's a patient-centered approach, in my opinion. And so I want to show some first-hand information, and this is something that's been working really well for me, imagining what's going on here and giving some perspective. So imagine I had 10,000 plants. Mother Nature is really nice in this respect. She doesn't lie. She doesn't play favorites. And so imagine I have 10,000 plants. Right now you're seeing 10,000 dots on your screen. Imagine now if I'm not taking good care of these plants. I'm not giving them enough water, not giving them enough sunshine. Soil's not in good condition. I'm just not taking good care of them. And would it surprise you then that 100 of these 10,000 plants, 1% of these plants falls ill? Would it surprise you? I was talking to a classmate of mine, and she's an expert gardener, green thumb, and I was explaining this to her and asking her this analogy, and she said, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm taking great care of my plants, and I usually lose 5 to 6% of them. Okay, so we're just playing along here, though. 10,000 plants, 100 of them fall sick because I'm not taking good care of them. I continue to not take good care of them. Would it surprise anybody that one of these 10,000 plants then dies? Would it surprise you? I'm not taking good care of them, and 1 out of the 100 that got sick passes away. Shouldn't surprise anybody. It should almost surprise you why more haven't died. And I'll ask you this corollary question. Are the people in the United States taking great care of themselves? Is most of the modern developed world taking great care of themselves? Are they taking all the health parameters in? No, they seem overly stressed. They seem like they're lacking sleep. They're not getting great nutrition. They're not getting enough exercise. They don't have a positive cogitation, a positive thought process and mental attitude. Is it surprising then that 1% will get sick and then 1% of that will fall ill and die? I'm not saying I want anyone to die. I want everyone to do well. But it shouldn't surprise us if we're not taking care of the healthy parameters that things are going to go wrong. And to top that off, imagine I had these 10,000 plants and I tell you about this little subset that's going awry and I can't figure out what's causing the death in these plants. I'm not paying attention to obviously the parameters of my garden, but I say, 100 of them got sick and 1 died, and you're looking at the plants and you're going, yeah, but there's 2,000 over there that look really sick as well, on the edge of dying themselves. And I turn to those plants and I go, I know how to take care of those already. I'm focusing on this. Does that make sense to you? Well, those other 2,000 plants I'm talking about are diabetes, heart disease, cancer, of lifestyle. These are all things that we can affect and know the cause of, and yet we're not even working on these. It is a redundant question, Penny. I appreciate it. But I don't think people are asking these questions. It should not be surprising that people in the developed world aren't getting great health results. They're not taking care of themselves. You can't get health without taking and putting the health parameters in. And I'll discuss how you can have your best chances of living well and healthy in these current times as this goes on. But that's the analogy I want to use. Is this 10,000 plants concept it shouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, it should shock people. We don't want people dying. It's shocking that people aren't taking care of the inputs to health. That's the shocking part to me, not that you take that care and you don't get good results. Now, I don't know if you can see this part here, but I want to zoom in. This is coming straight from the CDC. And you look here and you see deaths from 0 to 17, 385, and that's over a year and a half now for COVID. Anyone been warned about their children dying from pneumonia? I mean, we should be fretting about that, right? Because there's almost 900 deaths from pneumonia this last year. Shouldn't that be the concern then for children? Even if you're up to 30 years old, shouldn't we be talking about pneumonia? It's on par with COVID. I don't hear anything about pneumonia, though. Apparently, it's just not as attractive. Even if you're up to 40 years old, pneumonia deaths are just on par with COVID deaths. If we take a look here and see all the different cases, again, that's the problem. 38 million cases and only that few deaths. And the cases, again, are highly suspicious because we're not really being too accurate with our case counts as far as turning into clinical cases, actually having symptoms along with just a positive test. If we look at the worldwide statistics on what's going on in 2015, 2016, 2017, and COVID times, respiratory diseases plus COVID, you're looking at 3 million deaths. And no one wants to see anyone die. At least I hope not. And yet, this should not be surprising, these death rates. It's not that far out of the norm. In 2017, we had 6.5 respiratory deaths, 6.5 million respiratory deaths. In 2016, we had 6.4 million respiratory deaths. 2015, 6.3 million. I'm kind of confused here. And again, look at those huge other deaths that we're having: cardiovascular death, cancer. We have a lot of other problems that we could be addressing if the real care is addressing human health. And again, what I'm suggesting here and going to be talking about now is quickly getting into masks themselves, and then we're going to talk about the vaccine as well. This is not going to be popular stuff. I got to be honest, even in the medical world I'm in, I can get myself probably into some trouble with this. Not because I'm doing anything wrong. I'm questioning the narrative. That should be fine. Science should constantly be questioning, right, and investigating. I'm using peer-reviewed research. I'm using data coming from the CDC, coming from these establishments. And just because 10,000 people say something's correct does not mean it's correct. And so it's not just a mask. Look at all the waste that's being produced. It's not just a mask. It's an issue on many levels. And there are many studies that confirm the ineffectiveness of masks, peer-reviewed studies. There are many studies that confirm the dangers of wearing masks as far as health degradation. So it's not something that's just to be brushed aside. If it's true, then shouldn't we be factoring this into our decisions as well? Just taking a look at some pictures here, we can see Hawaii COVID deaths or COVID cases. They've got their masks on. They got indoor mask mandate, outdoor mask mandate, and somehow they're having cases go on the rise. Take a look at UK. Required masks, COVID cases still going up. California, required masks, cases still going up. California and Texas, in case you thought I was just being a little biased here, let's take Texas into account. Texas and California still mimicking each other, despite the fact that one has absolutely reckless behavior and another having mask mandates, people having to stay at home. I appreciate the comments about homeschooling. I can definitely empathize with that. It seems like it's a great time to get on board with that and get out of the indoctrination schools. Schools are supposed to be an opportunity for children to expand into the world and investigate and learn and not get programmed into certain ways of thinking. It's supposed to be an open space and safe place to learn and develop. And as you saw with the earlier zombie photo of the children being taught to walk like zombies so they can keep their 6 foot of distance and wearing the masks and the shields, it's getting a little ludicrous when it's not based in any type of science. We're looking at North Dakota and South Dakota. You'll see here that North Dakota has masks, business restrictions. South Dakota does not. South Dakota even has a lesser spike than North Dakota. How are we explaining this? How are they paralleling each other despite having drastically different protocols? Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the mask. We look at total cases per million, COVID cases. We compare Georgia, no mask. Florida, no mask. Texas and California both had masks at these times, still following the same trend. Interesting. Let's go to overseas. Germany and Sweden. Sweden, notorious, has been doing no mask, no social distancing at all for the entire pandemic. I'm sorry, it's hard to say that's pandemic. And again, we go back to that plant analogy. It's weird to focus on the small little thing that you don't understand entirely compared to the huge problems in healthcare you already have. And all those other huge problems lead to the potentials for people having comorbidities and problems with those other things that you don't know about yet. So it's bizarre focus, that's for sure. And hopefully these graphs continue to show that. And I want to move on then. Even more so, we see Germany and Sweden comparing the medical mask mandates in Germany, getting very authoritarian, very bad, very strong in, I won't try to use the qualitative bad and good here, but very strong in their enforcement of the wearing of the masks. And yet, Sweden is on the same exact track as them, more or less. Bavaria and Germany, in case those of you out there are saying, yeah, but those are those weak masks. Let's try the N95s, those serious masks. Come on. There's no good data on this either. And if you look again at the just paralleling countries that are doing this, they've done this study. The studies are out as well. Those 47 mask ineffectiveness studies show the same type of material and evidence here, which is go ahead, wear the N95 surgical masks. You're still getting the same results. You're still getting the same results as people who are wearing either no mask or mask. Interesting. I'll quote Booker T. Washington. As I said, I'm rereading his Up From Slavery biography with our son. A lie does not become truth. Wrong doesn't become right. And evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by the majority. It's okay to be in the minority. There's a lot of times you're going to be in the minority doing the healthy thing, doing the peaceful thing, doing the truthful thing. Just because a bunch of people say something does not make it so. It just doesn't. And it's good to remind ourselves of that, because I understand sometimes it can feel a little isolating or a little bit lonely if you are seeing some of these things and noticing some of these patterns and not just taking it in. I'm going to take a look here and show you and talk about the FDA. So the FDA just recently approved the vaccine. Woohoo. The FDA approves aspartame. The FDA has approved how many different things that have been killing people that are still on the market for sale. The FDA has retracted how many different things because they later learned that they were killing people. Feel free to look at this. There's evidence I'm showing you here, and you can go back and check the other examples I'll show you here. But this was done by, again, Harvard Medical School. Just someone, just some little college out there that is putting together some research here. And an osteopathic medical school, Rowan University and York University. And this is a fantastic paper on the institutional corruption of pharmaceuticals and the myth of safe and effective drugs. Because we have all this money tied up, you can't get good data coming out of these places. When the FDA is funded by pharmaceutical agencies, you're not going to get unbiased material coming out. So just because the FDA approved it, it's just like Booker T. Washington said, I don't care how many people say it's true. Show me that it's true. And you can't find it to be true. And I definitely wouldn't start trusting somebody blindly. Again, I can't, they could be correct. You can guess something and be correct too. And they can be legit on certain things. But Kevin, my example you're asking how to deal with the normies. This is how you have to deal with them. They have to be willing to, if they say they're open-minded, okay, that means you're willing to admit you have made false conclusions, you've seen information that wasn't complete, and are willing to change your opinion based upon new information presented to you. Otherwise, you don't have an open mind. I can be wrong. I've said this about the vegan diet. I've been vegan for 13 years. I still admit I could be wrong. I can always be wrong. I'm very finite in my knowledge. I don't know what I don't know yet, and I'm happy to admit and humble enough to admit there's a lot I don't know. Way more that I don't know than I do know. And so, normies, whoever's on the other side of either fence, be willing to look on the other side and see what's over there. I have, I know I'm getting a little off top here, but these are just some of the vaccine books I have these are about anti-vaxxers and the deadly choices they make to harm us all. This is, Vaccines, What You Should Know by Paul Offit, Lewis Bell. These are pro-vaccine books. I don't just read one side. If the other side's convincing, I don't have any horse in the game besides my children's health, my health. And so I just want to learn the best that I can. And so I have Rockefeller Medicine Run sitting on the shelf. So I read both sides, and open-minded people should be able to do that. If your position is so strong, you should be willing to investigate the other position, hear the other side out, and come to your conclusions. If you're spot on, then you'll remain spot on. If you're off, then grateful. Be grateful. You got a chance to find a better truth. Another study here found that a third of FDA-approved drugs had problems. A lot of these problems, by the way, for ladies out there, affected women more so than they affected men. Fertility issues, various issues that are important to people, I imagine. As well, another study here found over 462 medical products were pulled off because of adverse drug reactions from the FDA. This is the same FDA that just gave a stamp to something that's so young as far as testing goes. Does anyone know what the long-term effects are of the vaccine? You can't know because it hasn't been done. It hasn't been studied long-term. And to that point, when there's risk, no government should be at the kitchen table making decisions for parents and children regarding medical decisions at all. At all. At all. That is a parent decision. That is an individual's decision. And Jamel Holly here also had a great quote of, whenever there's risk, there should be choice. There should always be choice. If there's a risk, it should be up to you to make that decision. It reminded me of something from C.S. Lewis, who said, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. You have to do this for your own good. That is an interesting and scary proposition, to be constantly in that position of, I have to do what you determine is good for me. Who are you to determine what's good for me? Didn't you put your pants on in the morning, just like I did? We both put our pants on in the morning, or, put our shoes on. We all get dressed. We're all humans. We were all babies at one point. How are you so much more capable of deciding what's good for me and good for my family? And then to that point, most doctors don't do what they tell you to do, or at least what they're recommended to tell you to do. Some doctors are great doctors. I don't want to put that out there. Some doctors are great and respectful and tell you the truth. But just like Paul Thomas up here in Oregon, he lost his license for a little while just from telling parents the good side of vaccines and the negative side of vaccines. His book's back here too, called The Vaccine Friendly Plan. He's pro-vaccine on some, and also aware of some of the dangers on others, and aware of some other options you can do to ensure your health and vitality. And so he just gives parents both sides, like we're supposed to do. That's the only way you can truly say you have informed consent, is you understand the negatives and you understand the potential positives. You also understand the potential other routes you can take to get the same result you're looking for. You got to have both sides in order to actually be informed to give your consent. Just getting the scare tactic does not give you, if you don't do this, you're going to die. Your children's going to die. That is not a very ethical practice. So let's just see here. Pediatricians do not vaccinate their own children. Someone asked me, well, a few people had asked me to give them specific studies to go check out about doctors and vaccinations. These are those studies. Pediatricians do not vaccinate their own children against chickenpox. Doctors often refuse vaccines for influenza, pertussis, hepatitis B. Check out the study. The link's right there. You can see it. This is from Clinical Pediatrics, 2003. Many physicians voiced reservations about routine use of the varicella, the chickenpox vaccine for healthy children. Interesting. Many pediatricians also do not vaccinate their own children according to official recommendations. These studies are replete. There are repeated studies about this. Pediatricians, and I'll get into why they don't do this as well. I'll show you some data that makes it very clear to see why they don't do these kind of things. It's not that they can't be ignorant, right? They're in the field, and yet they're not doing this. Pediatricians also reject vaccines for their own children. 10% of pediatricians, 21% of pediatric specialists claim they would not follow CDC recommendations for future progeny. Despite their educations, physicians in this study expressed concern over the safety of vaccines. Despite their education, despite their conditioning that were given in medical school, all of 4 hours max about vaccines, and it's not about how they work or what are the potentials you could use or any type of proving you. They don't give papers like this. They don't give evidence. They just say, this is what you do. If you got this you got Staph aureus, you give this drug. You got, you want to avoid herpes, you give these vaccines. And here's the schedule to give them out. here's how you give them out. Here's how you deliver the shot. They don't ever give you these back and forth type of critical thinking chances for you to do as a doctor of, is this a good idea? Is it the best idea? Is it the safest idea? Is it the most effective idea? No. No counter narrative is ever offered. Doctors and nurses in China and Spain reject influenza vaccines. Why? Again, I'll show you why in a little bit here, all the more so, but doctors and nurses in Germany and the USA also reject influenza vaccines. I mean, these are people who are trained to do this stuff, right? Shouldn't they be happy to give their children these wonderful things, these wonderful agents of healing? Doctors and nurses in Canada and Brazil reject influenza vaccines. The quote here is, influenza vaccination among healthcare workers is poor. It's not like they don't know. They just know more than you generally get to know. That's all it is. And when we study this even further, we see the more educated the parents are, the less likely they are to give children vaccines. Why is that? That doesn't make sense, right? But 10,000 people who don't know anything about something saying this is the thing to do doesn't really give it much credence. But you have a bunch of people who are more educated on the topic, doctors, people who have finished master's degree. The further you go up in education, the less likely it is the parents are going to give all the shots that are recommended to them to give to their children. College graduates reject HPV vaccination for their daughters. High school dropouts endorse it. It's the poor that generally are the most vaccinated, that are the most susceptible to the medical influence. Again, this is not generally put out there, but if you're looking for a third or second or even first, depending on Harvard, Johns Hopkins, depending on which study you're looking at, they say the number one cause or second cause or the third cause, but it's always in the top three, of death within the United States of America and UK and other areas of development are medical treatments. Not just accidents. Errors and accidents happen, but those are actually rarer than the actual people dying from properly prescribed, properly vaccinated routes of action. And we don't really hear about that. Because that would mean you have to take less drugs. That would mean you have to try a different path. And I guess that may make a lot of sense, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So let's take a look here. Yeah, around the science. There's no the science. The science being science, you can be scientific, but you don't believe the science. I practice science. I think scientifically. You don't believe the science. That's a dogma type of position. Believe something I haven't actually investigated. That's religion. Nothing wrong with religion, but when it comes to enforcing on other people, I think we all know that's kind of an ugly procedure if you're going to force your religion on other people. You go ahead and believe your thing, but those who would trade safety for freedom deserve neither. It's a nice quote. Iatrogenic is what they call it. It's a nice hidden word. Iatrogenic means doctor caused, physician caused. Obinas brought up iatrogenic diseases is what they call it, or iatrogenic death, but that's doctor caused. You might as well just, one of the fantastic skills we learn in medical school is how to convert English into Latin or Greek, so you can't recognize it and I can feel in an elevated position. I don't know why we don't speak more plain English. If someone said to me, the third cause of death is doctor caused death, that would stick with me more than iatrogenic disease. And if we're looking at the current rate of, hopefully everyone knows what VAERS is. It's the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. It's not that great and accurate, but it's all we have right now. And this is, again, coming from the mainstream, the CDC, the U.S. government data. Look at this. Maybe this is why the doctors aren't so keen on giving their children experimental treatments, experimental vaccinations. All deaths reported to VAERS by year. Do you see that huge spike? That's not people not wearing a mask. That didn't cause that spike. Those are deaths from vaccines. Interesting. And sad. Those are not good numbers to see. 12,000 deaths reported. And we still haven't even gotten to the other side of this as well. I still haven't gotten to the best slides yet. But if this was, I remember Black Lives Matter, and apparently that flies in the mainstream media. So if we're playing that card, why don't we play that card a little bit too? Because there's a whole bunch of people dying who are, notorious and well known within the black community. I have a hard time with that label of coloration, but of the Moorish African community, African lineage community, and just taking a vaccine passes away. This is another lady, a pastor who had passed away, Renee. My mother was, and this is her daughter making this quote, my mother was trying to protect herself, but it did not turn out that way. The daughter believes more research needs to be done, especially for those with underlying health issues. That's for sure. Whether it's the vaccine injury or it's the COVID, we should be looking at the underlying health issues. If I have a bunch of plants that are really, really sick, are you going to blame the little thing that comes in at the end and takes them out? Or are you going to be looking at all the little problems I ignored that led up to a huge susceptibility? The daughter continues and says, why are we allowing people with underlying conditions to be guinea pigs for a vaccine that is still in clinical trials and emergency use? Anyone know how long this is still in clinical trials for? I read all the Pfizer papers. I read the Moderna. I read the Johnson & Johnson papers. I actually read the clinical papers and the methods of what they were carrying out. And clinical trials last 3 years. Phase 3 lasts 3 years. How long ago did you hear about COVID? It hasn't even been 3 years. In phase 3, this is just from medical school. I'll just quote to you what we were just taught in virus class, in classes about viruses, which is when you're making a new vaccine, you go through various phases. Phase 0, well, first you have preclinical trials, which last 3 to 6 years. What were the results of the preclinical trials for COVID vaccine? Anyone know? There weren't any preclinical trials. Those would be done on animals. I hate this. I hate to hear the experiments that they do on animals, but it's supposed to be done for human safety. Those were not done. And then phase 0 trials, and you have phase 1. Phase 0 lasts about a year. Phase 1 lasts months to a year. Phase 2 is supposed to last 1 to 2 years. Phase 3 is supposed to last 3 to 5 years. And then there's phase 4. We haven't even made it to phase 4. Phase 4, by the way, is when they come up with the black box label warnings. Phase 4 is when they decide, oh, this is having some serious adverse effects on chronic conditions. We don't know those yet. We're not even out of phase 3 clinical trials yet. Anyone trying to say you have to be taking this vaccine would be violating the Nuremberg Code. That's a Nazi code for those, well-intentioned people out there. That would be violating the Nazi code. You're not allowed to force people into experimental procedures or experiments of any sort against their will. So we have to be really mindful. If you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. So we have to know what we have. I really suggest anyone who's interested in helping people of color, who wants to help people in unfortunate situations, who wants to help the Moorish community, the African history community, the African lineage community. I still struggle with it. Moorish is the word I use. And the Latino community. If we want to look at that and help these communities, check out this documentary called Medical Racism. It is fantastic. It's only 40 minutes in length. It's available for free. Just type in Medical Racism documentary. You'll find it very quickly. And it explains very clearly and gives examples. Some of the graphs I'm using here, they share it as well. Especially ones I'm about to share. Still, the best is yet to come. And it lets you know why people don't just immediately trust the government. Yeah, we all know about Tuskegee and other horrible experiments, but there's other reasons just like this, and that are still currently happening to this day. So it's wise to remember this quote as well from George Santayana. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And you gotta love this quote from Marcus Aurelius. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. Most of the normies out there, the people going along with the go along, get along gang, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. So their opinion, no matter how many you add of them together, doesn't add up to much. The milligram experiment. The Milgram, yes, it is. I hope if you watch that documentary, you'll see more information about that as well. Good point, Susanna. And these are the graphs I really want you to see. If you want to understand vaccines and what's really going on when it comes to human health, these are fantastic graphs to see. So as you'll see right here, hopefully you can see it nice and big. I don't know if I can make it any bigger, but right here you see measles deaths. This is going back to 1917 in the States. And you'll see the measles deaths on decline. Nice slope here. But at this point, in 1960, 1963, and then 1967, it really gets more popular, we see the measles vaccine introduced. Would anyone, just looking at this, would you ever assume that the measles vaccine was responsible for the drop in measles deaths? Does that seem to fit? In the chat, just someone let me know if that makes any sense. How you could explain that in any way. I'd love to hear someone explain that. But I can make no sense of that statement. I don't see how you can cite that the measles vaccine did anything. The curve of the graph, exponential trend line there, continued at the same rate. There's no drop. If we look at the UK, we'll see the same information. Measles vaccine gets introduced way at the end here, but we already have a 99.9% decline in the rate of vaccine, the rate of measles, rather. We bring in the trend line, we see no drop, no dip when we introduce the measles vaccine. But the measles vaccine is responsible for reducing measles. When we have measles outbreaks, it's because people aren't getting the vaccine. Again, if you don't know history, then you're doomed to repeat it. But if you know just a little bit of this stuff, you start to understand how some of these doctors who crack through, pull the veil behind, how they come up with different conclusions for their children when they find out this kind of stuff. They see the adverse effects, and they are intelligent enough to understand these graphs. I don't know. You have to be maybe in third grade to understand these graphs. Whooping cough, pertussis. Again, vaccine comes into play in 1957. The decline is already well on its way in the UK. How you could blame the vaccine makes no sense. In the States, we see a similar decline. Whooping cough already greatly reduced, 95% reduced before we even see the introduction of the vaccine. When it comes on the scene, it's not like it immediately gets to 100,000 people or a million people right on the drop, or 50% of the people. It still takes a while before that even happens. And yet, the trend line doesn't change at all. Pertussis vaccine did not do anything to pertussis. The whooping cough is already on the drop. How about scarlet fever occurring at the same time? Oh yeah, but there's no vaccine for scarlet fever. So how could that drop? And how could it drop just like the others? I mean, what? That can't make sense unless you have a different explanation. Unless you better understand how health happens. And I can explain why these things happen. A lot of people can explain these things. If you just take a different perspective, we take all of them into account. We see diphtheria, we see where penicillin comes in, whooping cough, measles vaccine. You see the same trend line happening for typhoid, whooping cough, diphtheria, measles, scarlet fever. Florence Nightingale was a very wise woman, and she said this: specific disease doctrine is the grand refuge of the weak, the uncultured, unstable minds, such as now rule in the medical profession. There are no specific diseases. There are specific disease conditions. The flies don't make the garbage. Flies come to the garbage. Bacteria don't really cause the disease. They show up where the host makes it available for them, where the environment is ripe for their growing. And I understand that can be a hard concept to wrap your head around, but stick with me a little bit longer on that and watch more of the videos that I put out regarding germs and viruses, and you'll see it makes a lot more sense than the current dogma that's being put forth, where you can have the coronavirus present in you, but you don't have the disease. You can have, I was running with a friend of mine, he's a medical doctor, and we go back and forth on these topics, and I appreciate his perspective, and he's questioning me oftentimes on the things I'm saying, and the positions I've come to conclusion on, and he asked about tuberculosis, and cited that, if you're in a room with 100 people, that five of those people are going to get tuberculosis if one person's sick with tuberculosis. And my question is, why don't the other 95 get sick? You do that with snake venom. Give snake venom to 100 people. Watch. They all show the same reaction. Give alcohol to people across the board. Some might have developed some tolerance, but they all show the same toxic effects of the drug. They also have the same toxic effects of the venom. But you do this with bacteria or viruses, and the majority of the people don't even get sick. Why? If the virus or the bacteria causes it, then it should cause it. It shouldn't be able to sit there and do nothing. It shouldn't be able to sit there and be overcome by the intelligence of the body. Unless you understand that it's the intelligence of the body that's running the show. And the way to go, no matter what the illness is, you want to create long-term health. You want to heal from something. Pay attention to what you're putting in. Pay attention to the thoughts. Pay attention to the emotions. Pay attention to the food, to the sleep, to the sunshine, to the fresh air. All the requisites of health. It may sound simple and also may sound more complicated because it's not as easy as Florence Nightingale points out here, as the simple disease doctrine of the uncultured mind, which is one thing that's coming after me. Here's one poison to kill it. It's a one-to-one thing. Health and disease aren't like that. Disease is the body's response to the environment around it. If you're getting bad responses, take care of the environment. Take care of the inputs. Addressing some of the questions here. We don't have to vaccinate the papayas and the other things that have tested positive for COVID. It has been done. Other things can test positive. If you knew what they're testing, it's a funny little thing because they're only testing 3 little parts of a genetic sequence that is a computer-generated genetic sequence. It's not like they took human cells and looked at it from end to end of the genetic sequence and actually sequenced it the way they did the Human Genome Project. The way they do viruses is a very interesting procedure. I won't get into it. I think I described it in the last live stream I did. I understand how it's done. Most virologists, for some reason, don't understand how it's done and how it's a problem that you never isolated the product you're supposed to be defining, but they essentially are making up a genetic sequence. They say intelligently so. Still, you're making it up, you're putting it together, and then they're looking for just 3 parts within that sequence. That's what most of your tests are looking at, your PCR and your rapid antigen tests. These are not looking at very specific things of anything. And yes, health is multifaceted. There is no panacea. The only solution is to take great care of yourself, and when you're not taking great care of yourself, you can't expect great results. Which goes back to the plant analogy. The U.S. population can't expect great results. They're not taking great care of themselves. I would love to see them take great care of themselves. I would love to see them focus on being healthy, living healthfully, and recognizing that the only path to healing is taking care of the body. There's a fantastic intelligence inside of me, inside of you, and it's always orchestrating 70 trillion cells, all the different operations simultaneously. That is the thing. That is the force. That is the spirit that is amazing. And we should be trying to work with it. And we provide the proper environment, inputs, health is the natural result. And I appreciate you being here with me, family. I really do. Thank you for listening to some of the things I have to say here. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to me. Chad's asking me a question. Does the vaccinated break through the new variants from their body? I'm not exactly sure what the question is here, Sanchad, but I'll try to interpret it. The vaccinated break through the new variants from their body. The variants are interesting because when you're just piecing something together, see, I'm not going to have variants in my genetic code. There's not going to be variants because and yes, some genes can be turned on and some off. But as far as when you sequence a human cell, you're actually able to look from one end to another. If we do that with viruses, which they do in, biology is different than medical functions for some reason. In biology, they have no problem taking what they call a virus, a bacteriophage, and actually isolating it so it's just by itself, and then getting its genetic sequence isolated, end to end. In virology, they're mashing up someone's sputum, combining it with antibiotics, combining it with cow and horse serum, and then taking that mix that they've got there, and then looking at various genetic pieces within it and saying, using a computer to then look for certain things that should be like a coronavirus and synthesizing it out of that way. If you run it differently, you're going to get different variants. And so there are going to be continuous variants coming out the way they're currently modeling the virus. We just need to know better, quite honestly, and behave better. As I showed the example even early on about how we handled swine flu. We did nothing like this. It was way more deadly to a whole host of different subsets of people, and we never treated children like this. That's my main reason I wanted to make this video. I can't stand seeing what people are doing to children under the guise of health. It's not healthy, and I'm willing to stand out, quite honestly, on this topic. You probably won't be able to see this here, but if you had to play Where's Waldo and find the unmasked man, you'd find that in my medical school, there are, 100 some doctors here. There's only one guy up in this corner here who doesn't have a mask on. And that would be me. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And it's not like I'm doing it. I mean, I know this, the storyline comes around of you not being compassionate, you not being empathetic. I throw that back in everyone's face, whoever tries to put that at me, because I would say the mainstream population, the mainstream medical world is not being empathetic or caring or compassionate to the general population of people suffering from a host of diseases. Why aren't we talking about diabetes, obesity, heart disease? Why aren't you talking about the suicide rate that are going up, the mental health disparities that we're seeing in the world right now? Sure, if you're rich and well off, you can go virtual and work from home. Cool. A bunch of my family cannot do that. A bunch of people who are not in good conditions cannot do that. And so I don't condone that type of slander at all. If we're going to throw the slander, I'm going to be able to put it right back. I mean, I know what I'm doing. I know how health is caused. I've seen people recover from diabetes, from heart disease. I'll stick with Florence Nightingale on this topic of the specific disease doctrine is for the people who have not really critically thought about how health happens and how long-term longevity of health will happen. That's why the American population keeps getting worse and worse health results over the last 30, 40 years. They keep spending more money, but they keep getting worse and worse health results because they're not taking good care of themselves. And there's nothing that can make up for that. A guy who's smoking cigarettes every day, smoking multiple packs, there's no cure for cancer coming along for this guy. There's not. I wish the best for them, but you cannot violate the laws of health and get health. So those of you who may have felt like you were on the outskirts, I hope this has helped you feel a little bit more emboldened to stand up and just say your piece. Stand up and just question. At some point, I'll have to share the documents the emails that I have put forth to the dean of the medical school. They try to roll things out and just push things over people who don't have time to evaluate it. Most parents are busy. Most people are busy in the world. Most people don't have or think they don't have the mental capacity to understand some of these concepts or investigate some of these concepts. You do. You have everything you need inside of you, up here, in here, to take care of yourself, take care of your family, to understand the things that are talked about in the media. You can understand them. Quite honestly, you can. And the medical professions really aren't getting that much training on these things anyway. So thank you much, family. Appreciate it. I will be on next on Wednesday again, trying to get back into the routine of things and continue delivering hopefully useful information. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to me. Drop me a line, drop me a DM, post a comment below this, and I will get back to you in the next video. I, again, just really implore you to, Albina, applying to medical school. They might ask you about this COVID myth. I'm happy to hear you're on the path to helping people like that, Albina. You know what? I'm going to answer that question right now because and this is not to you, Albina. Pick your path. I don't know your path. If you want to be a surgeon, you got to go to medical school. A couple people have asked, because I made some videos about medical school, would I recommend people go to medical school? In short, I would say, even to myself, looking back, I don't think I would. I didn't think they were so entrenched. I thought osteopathic schools would be a little bit more understanding. Maybe in certain areas. It seems like if you go to Idaho, if you go to Texas, if you go to Florida, certain demographics and certain climates are still of that mindset, whereas others have bitten so hard on the allopathic route of the drug and bug, and as I've been calling them, the M&M gang. They monetize and manage disease. They don't actually help you learn how to heal and create health. But the patients and most of the population still are looking for doctors to lead in this front. So I'm still happy to do this. I'm still happy you're going down that path, Abina. But just on osteopathic manipulation, right on. So osteopathic manipulation is quite useful, and that is great as well. So happy to hear you on that path, Abina. And again, make your own choices for those going to medical school. But in general, if you want to learn health, that's on you. If you want to study vaccinations, that's on you. Nutrition, you. Fitness, you. Healing, fasting, all these different modalities that are very, very useful to people and allow the patient to feel empowered, that's going to be on you. And I'm honestly, one of the main reasons I was going to medical school and still going is because I want to hold other doctors accountable. And hopefully we can do that. Obviously, the patients, I need your help as well. So we have to encourage our doctors to be critical thinkers, to fully investigate and give us all the information that they have, and play our active role as well, whether it be civics or healthcare. It's up to the individual to participate in that process. And otherwise, those that are going to do best for us, oftentimes, unfortunately, have not done that, especially when there's monetary incentives to not do so. Love you all. Be well. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you later. I'm yours for health, for freedom, for joy, for compassion. This is a wonderful world. This is a wonderful life. It's too short to be living it unhealthfully, unhappily. Don't hold any grudges, please, against anyone who sees this a little differently. I just take it as the best assumption that they're just lost. If they knew, they would do. If doctors knew what they could do, if healthcare workers knew what they could do with health, nutrition, fasting, I think most of them would do it. They just don't get it. Most of the population watching the mainstream media, they're certainly not getting it. And I feel bad for them because they go out in parts. There's examples already living out there. People are accepting in the medical world, they write it all the time that you're just going to get old and fall apart. I'm not joking. They expect certain things to just go wrong. There's long-lived cultures. Feel free to read books like, let's see here. Healthy at 100. People are healthy at 100. There's cultures that are healthy at 100. Someone else brought up Rockefeller Medicine Men. Learn a little bit about medical history. It'll give you some, your history. You will be quite emboldened to do certain things. Some other great books on the current, I'm just on this 10. What really makes you ill? Understand what disease is and how to recover from it on your own. You can do that quite easily. Read these books. This is a tome, but it's worth the read. This book, shorter, it's kind of expensive right now, but it's really worth the read. Virus Mania. You want to understand how viruses work, what that process looks like. You will be more knowledgeable than every single medical I'll say 99.99% of the medical professionals you come across. If you read books like this, they do not get this kind of information. Health and long life. There are many books out there about long-lived cultures. We can live a long, healthy, fantastic life into our hundreds. We should be expecting that, and you can expect that if you're actually taking care of yourself. Just like we expect a rose bush to do great when we're taking all the parameters into account and taking great care of it. So do your studies, enjoy your life, and the next time, be well, family. Got to stop this share. Here we go.